issue is when we jump to action, we are being reactive to what's in front of us. And what we're not doing is really taking a step back to say, okay, before I move in this one direction quickly, what other options do I have? For us, our operating system is the beliefs that we hold, which quite frankly, we're not even conscious that we have these beliefs because they have been with us for so long. But as you grow, particularly in what I see is you're leading at scale where you cannot be involved in everything and it's impeding you being able to grow capacity in your team, that's when you have to question whether this belief is actually really helpful.
It's not really that you're saying that belief is wrong. It's that you're shifting that belief to the right direction.
And that's the reframing of the belief. If you feel connected to yourself, you belong anywhere.
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. I believe that getting out of your comfort zone is really, truly, ultimately about recognizing that what got you to this point in your career, your expertise, your perfectionism, your knowledge, your execution capability, among many others, is not necessarily what is really going to take you to the next step. And it's not necessarily going to be effective. It may get you there, but it won't make you effective while you're there. And I believe, as many of you know, that leadership is a constant growth journey if you're going to be a great leader. Now, you can stop growing, and I suspect your leadership will take a back seat accordingly, but that's up to you. So what I want to focus on today is what is blocking your success. And it's a little bit of what are you thinking in your head, what are you believing in your head that is holding you back? More importantly, how do you recognize that? How do you understand what's behind it? And then what can you do about it? So my guest today is Muriel Wilkins. She's the founder and CEO of Paravis Partners, and she's a sought-after C-suite advisor, executive coach with 20-year track record helping senior leaders take their performance to the next level. The book we're talking about today is Leadership Unblocked: Break Through the Beliefs That Limit Your Potential. I should say she's also a co-author of Own the Room, Discover Your Signature Voice to Master Your Leadership Presence. And she's the host of the Harvard Business Review podcast called Coaching Real Leaders, which is a top 10 on many serving platforms. So Muriel, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thank you, Wanda. Thank you for having me here with you today.
It's a pleasure. I said to you kind of as we were just getting started, I really do like this book. And the things that you talk about in this book, to me, resonate with just about every coaching client I see on a daily basis. So I'm super excited to do that, to talk about it. But before we dive into this notion of the blockers, I want to know why. Why did you get focused on this particular topic? What led your exploration?
Oh, goodness. I think there were a number of paths, of converging paths that led me there. I will say, in all full transparency, after I co-wrote my first book, which was back in 2013, I swore I would never write another book again, and, the idea lands in your head and then goes down to your heart and it doesn't let you go. And this was one. And for me, I think what led me to it, as I said, was a convergence of paths. One is I recognized that with a lot of my coaching clients, we were very much focused on their behaviors and their actions and their skills and strategies. And what I realized was that for many of them, not all of them, but for many of them, even though we would put those actions into place, they were not sustainable. And, they would come back 6 months later, 12 months later, the old behavior. And so I started sort of scratching the surface as to why is that? And the idea is what birthed this book. I think in a parallel path, I was going through my own growth and recognizing that there were some things that were blocking me in my development and my growth, not only as a leader, but quite frankly, as a human being. And when I looked at my clients and I looked at myself, there was sort of this aha moment of, oh my goodness, both roads led to the same thing, is that we weren't truly looking at what under the hood, which is the beliefs that might be holding us back from really having the greatest impact that we could have.
Yeah, it's you make an interesting point in the book, both in telling your own story and the discovery of this. So I highly recommend that one. It's a great story. But you make an important point about how rapidly we jump to action.
Yeah.
So most leaders are in that position because they're quick to make a decision, quick to move to action, quick to execute, move. I mean, like it's go, 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 pretty much all day long. And you say no. So explain why no.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, first of all, I give everyone a lot of grace, including myself, for wanting to jump to action. Quite frankly, it's what we've been rewarded to do our entire lives. Our whole way of working, the workplace culture, is to jump to action. And the issue is when we jump to action, we are being reactive to what's in front of us, whether it's a team member that's not performing well, or a deliverable that's due, or a challenging situation that's happening within the organization. And what we're not doing is really taking a step back to say, okay, before I move in this one direction quickly, what other options do I have? And I think part of what I see is that as you mature as a leader, as you mature as an adult, what you begin to recognize is that there is not just one way of doing things. You have multiple options in front of you. And the maturity is in being able to choose the option that's going to lead to the outcome that you want, rather than the habitual response that you've always had. So when we tend to jump to action, which is where I say, no, 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 pause, which I'm sure is what you do with your coaching clients quite a bit, is it's really giving ourselves an opportunity to say, what choices do I have in front of me so that I can make one that's way more aligned with what it is that I want to have happened, but also with what it is that's going on inside of me.
Yeah. I think, it is very hard, as I'm sure you know, to get leaders to want to do that self-reflection piece because it feels like a waste of time. It feels slow. It's not immediately forthcoming. They'll say routinely, I know myself, and we all know we know ourselves in layers, but never in deep enough layers. So it's kind of like, and these behaviors have also, the blockers that you talk about, have also served people incredibly well.
Yeah.
So they're positively reinforced. I can understand why it's slow to get there.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the 7 blockers. So I just want you to list the 7 so that we all know what they are. And then I want to go back and take a deep dive in a couple of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk about the blockers, what I'm really talking about are the beliefs behind the behaviors, right? I think we tend to think about a lot of times in our work as coaches and leadership development, when you go to trainings, et cetera, we talk a lot about the behavior. And that's what I was focused on always, was what are the behaviors that a leader needs to have? And again, this is about not just looking at the behavior, but what is driving that behavior. You know, the metaphor that I've heard a lot of times is it's like if you have a computer, right? It's what's the operating system that's then driving the performance, which is the behavior of your computer. And for us, our operating system is the beliefs that we hold, which quite frankly, many times we're not even conscious that we have these beliefs because they have been with us for so long. And Wanda, as you have said, they have served us very, very well for so long until they don't. So when I looked at my clients from over the past 20 years, I looked at over 300 of my clients. I tried to see if there were patterns in the types of beliefs that they held that was getting in their way. And sure enough, there was a top 7 list that came out. Now, this is to say there are many others. This is not to say that these are the only ones, but these are the most common ones that came up. So in no order of priority, they're all sort of equal, if you will. The 7 are, the first is I need to be involved. As you can imagine, this is the voice that just says, I have to be engaged in everything. The second is I need it done now, which often leads us to a behavior of a sense of urgency for everything. The third is I know I'm right, which I know you're very familiar with. The fourth is I can't make a mistake. The fifth is, if I can do it, so can you. That one threw me off guard. I was not as familiar. It was one of the ones that surprised me. The fifth one is, I can't say no, which I think many people are familiar with. The sixth is, I don't belong here. And am I missing one? I feel like I'm missing one. Maybe I misnumbered them. I think I got through all of them, actually. I probably misnumbered them in some way. Yeah.
I don't recognize any there that that you haven't talked about. Okay, so it's interesting that you do, and it's really, I think, a really important point that you call out is we do focus on the behaviors because the behaviors are what we change. But the beliefs drive those behaviors. And if you don't get to the fundamental belief and what formed that belief and what has reinforced that belief, then the behaviors that follow may be temporary as you remind yourself for the next 3 months. But then you'll wobble right back to your really original start. Now, these beliefs, I know in my practice, sometimes I can identify where those beliefs come from. What are you seeing that's driving these beliefs, 7 beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, a lot, they're different for everyone. And that's why I think it's really important that individuals sort of have to spend some time and some energy in identifying how they formulated that belief, because how it was formed for me might be very different than how it was formed for you. And the way that we behave as a result of that belief also might be different. So it's very situational, individual, and contextual. That said, for the most part, many of these beliefs were formed from past experiences, going all the way back to childhood, quite frankly, and then formulated throughout one's career, right? So I can think for me, and by the way, as I worked through this book, it was a cathartic experience, Wanda, because every time I would say, oh yes, this is the belief that I have, then I'd go to the next chapter. I'm like, oh my God, I have this one too. And so I have literally, I feel like I have all 7 of them that have lived with me in some form or fashion, right? But if I think about some of them I can definitely see how they were formed in the family that I grew up in, right? They were sort of part of my family mantra. And then others, like I can't make a mistake, for example, really got drilled into me early on in my career, right? I can think about a manager who once told me, I showed up with a pencil, and he said, only people who lack confidence and who think they're going to make mistakes use pencils. And that just stuck with me, right? And I was like, oh my God, like I'm never going to use a pencil again, which is idiotic, but it stuck with me. And really it started making me hyper vigilant around making mistakes and what that would say about me. And so there was this notion of I can't make a mistake that just got drilled down. And so they can become from not only our personal circumstances, but also what we receive from a societal conditioning as well.
Yeah, I see them happening in school. The ways in which we
Absolutely.
reinforce behavior in school. I see them happening from managers we dislike, who we say, I'm never going to do that, or they drilled in a behavior that becomes a limiter for us. I also see them coming from managers, leaders, coaches, teachers that we admire, who had a particular quality and they keep coming up. Okay, I want to drill into one of them. Mm-hmm. All right, my favorite one on the top of the list is this notion of I need to be involved. Okay, now I can say I need to be involved in a really negative way, as I need to be involved in absolutely everything and nobody can make a decision without me. And we would all go, oh, no, that's not me. But I can also say I need to be involved because if I'm not involved, things won't happen at the speed, at the pace, with the accuracy. I won't be aware. Somebody will ask me a question that I can't answer, and a host of other justifications for I need to be involved. So walk us through. You maybe won't do this as a story, but how does this happen? And what's the underlying message behind it? What's the belief behind it?
Behind it? So I will, self-divulge, like the I need to be involved was the one that when I first started writing this, I'm like, oh yeah, this is all me. Right? And I understand for myself, and I'm not, afraid about sharing around where that came from for me, right? Which I'll share in a little bit. But I think in general, as you put it, the intent behind it is almost never negative, right? Like one actually thinks they're being helpful. And I think that's where there's a difference that happens around how this serves you as you move through your career. So as an individual contributor, for example, early on, fresh out of college, my need to be involved was actually critical, right? My boss wanted me to be involved in everything, right? But as you grow, particularly in what I see is you're leading at scale where you cannot be involved in everything. And not only is it impeding your own capacity, but it's impeding you being able to grow capacity in your team. That's when you have to question whether this belief is actually really helpful. At the source of it, I think back to your question around what is behind it, it's often a fear of what's going to happen if we're not involved. And the fear is usually that if I'm not involved, this is the story we tell ourselves. If I'm not involved, something disastrous is going to happen and I won't be able to handle if that happens. Therefore, I'm going to preempt it by being involved. Okay. Now, is that an issue? Yes, of course that could happen. But do you have to apply that in every given situation? Absolutely not. And that's when we get in trouble. I know that's where I've gotten in trouble with it in terms of that belief being there.
I remember a very senior leader I worked with in a highly technical area, and he was super, 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 super smart. So we're talking somebody who's reporting to the CEO. And basically, he was very crystal clear. High technical area, deep knowledge. There are 3 issues that are happening in this coming year, probably in 2 years, that I have to be all over because they're too critical for the long-term path, a whole bunch of other reasons. I've got to be involved in those 3.
Yeah.
The other 20, 30, 50 that are happening, I've assembled a team that is close enough. Like, they won't get it perfect. It's all right. They'll get it 90%, 80%, 85%. They'll get better at it. But those issues won't sink me. These 3 issues will sink me. That clarity between where I really must be involved for legitimate business strategy reasons versus the rest is something I find very few people practice.
Yeah. And that's the reframing of the belief, right? That simple reframing of moving from I need to be involved, period, versus I need to be involved in the things that really matter, as an example, or I need to be involved in where I add the most value, period. I need to be involved in the top 3 priorities for our organization moving forward, period. There's this filtering that then puts guardrails on your level of involvement and engagement that is simply driven by a shift in the belief or the mantra or the mindset that you bring into any given situation. And then the behavior follows, right? Because it's like, okay, well, then what are those 3 priorities? Let me go through some prioritization. But when I see people just go through prioritization, but never really change the mindset, the action and the behavior really doesn't change. It's just an exercise in futility, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah, that means everything moves to the urgent box or the important box, and nothing ever gets let the team handle it. It'll be okay. And by the way, you have no capacity put on the time on the things that actually really matter. You're reminding me of Richard Metcalf's quote that I give him credit for all the time. It's like, you will never free your time until you know what you're freeing your time to do. And that's what you're saying. Where's my prioritization? All right, walk me through the process now, because you have a lovely process that you outline. How do I begin to recognize that I have this belief? I have to be involved in everything. And how do I move it forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to say, Wanda, none of what I'm sharing here in terms of a framework is revolutionary, right? Like I did not originate the language around beliefs and even the process of how you move through changing beliefs. What I found is that language it's used a lot in parenting and relationships and self-work. It's rarely used in the workplace. And so that was the other part of my curiosity was like, well, why not? Like, we're human beings operating in the workplace. We bring in these beliefs and they have an impact. So how can one move through them in the workplace? And so the process that I've used with my clients, as well as on myself, is really threefold. The first step is to even recognize that you are blocked, that something is off. And this is what I call uncovering your hidden blockers, right? How do you know that that's happening? Something feels off, right? You are not meeting the goals you want to meet, or somebody else is telling you, hey, your impact is not aligning with expectations. It can be a number of different things, but something is not going according to plan, either your plan, somebody else's plan, or the contextual plan. The math is not mathing, as I will say, right? So this notion of something is off is important because you have to recognize that you have to have some motivation and some recognition that then you want something different. So the first is uncovering that something is off. And then you start being curious around, well, what is the impact that I'm having? What are the behaviors that I'm demonstrating? And as we just did, what is the belief that is driving the behavior? So you name the belief, and that's where we get to some of the 7 that I listed, or they could be others, right? Then we can move to the second step, which is unpacking the blocker. And the unpacking the blocker is that pause that we talked about beforehand. It's not moving automatically to, oh my God, something's off now, let me do something about it. It's actually saying, oh, okay, yes, I hold this belief, but why do I hold this belief? Now, why do we do this, right? Why is this important? This is not to, open up a can of worms that then sends you to therapy. And although some people might need therapy to get through it, it is so that you can recognize it in the future, so you can familiarize yourself with it, and so that you can accept it rather than resist it. The more you resist that the belief is here, the more it will keep popping itself back up. So in order to then be able to shift out of it, I tell my clients, I'm like, you got to cozy up with it. You know why? Because the next time you see it coming, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, there you are. Thank you so much for helping me all those times, but this is not one of those times. Go sit over there, right? So unpacking it is understanding it just like you would a friend, right? And then you can move on to the last piece, which is unblocking. And unblocking is where we do the magic of what we just did, which is, okay, what is the new belief that would help me in this particular situation? So as we just demonstrated before, oh, maybe I should just be involved in the things where I actually add value. If that's my new belief, now I can talk about, okay, so what actions will come out of that? What are the new behaviors that I need to put in place? And you can then start action planning and putting those in place.
It's, you reminded me again how much these are beliefs that we hold deep in the core of ourselves. And as you reframe them, sort of recognize them, start to name them, get comfortable with them, understand where they come from. It's not really that you're saying that belief is wrong. It's that you're shifting that belief to the right direction. So instead of I need to be involved in everything, I need to be involved in this stuff. Or I need to be involved in different stuff, or whatever it is. It's understanding. So it's unpacking the belief, recognizing the belief, admitting to the belief, and then saying, where does it hold and where does it no longer hold? And then from there, you can create an action plan that might actually survive the 6 months coaching engagement.
That's right. And I think what you just said there, Wanda, is so critical. I think we tend to not only look at beliefs, but also the behaviors as right or wrong or good or bad. And that is language that I stay away from. Because again, let's not forget at some point, those beliefs actually served you really, really well. And this is where we get into, when we think about adaptable leadership, this is what adaptable leadership is. It's the ability to hold the and. It's, yes, I can have that belief and I can also have another. Right? That might be quite different. Now I have choice and I'm able to adapt based on the situation and the context of which one I'm going to apply without necessarily losing myself. And the losing myself is shoving aside or losing all the things that did help me, because I might have to tap into them at some point or another. I mean, listen, if the house is on fire, the belief of I need to get it done now is critical. I'm going to tap into that, So I don't want to put it in the garbage. I just want to let it rest for a little bit, because there might be other beliefs that might be more helpful, not only to me, but to the organization in this moment in time.
Yeah. All right. So I think I love this one. So I need to be involved is a reframing to where you're adding the biggest impact or some version of that one. But it's understanding what got you to believe that you need to be involved, that it can't happen unless you're involved, and how much involvement is involved. Let's go to my second favorite, which I see right, left, and center, especially when I talk to experts. I know I'm right. And I will even say to most of my clients, you probably are. However, that isn't getting you where you want to go. So walk me through how this I know I'm right happens.
Yeah. Wanda, and I love that you said that, right? That you often say to your clients, yeah, you probably are. Because quite frankly, my experience has been that the leaders that I have worked with who have this as a stronghold, as a belief, it does not work to say, well, maybe if you just listen, you might actually find something else that, or a better answer than what you have. Because actually, quite frankly, most of the ones that I've worked with, they have an uncanny ability to actually know the answer. They have this uncanny ability to see around corners. They're able to see what's going to happen down the line way more than others. The issue is their approach to trying to get others to see like them or just bulldoze their way just doesn't work and overshadows this ability that they have. So this acceptance around, yeah, you probably are right. And though, is that belief then supporting you when you go into those meetings? Should that be what you lead with? So underlying that though, what forms this belief? I mean, you mentioned school earlier. This is a big one. In terms of where schooling really impacts individuals who have this belief, because quite frankly, we were not rewarded at school for getting it wrong. We were rewarded and celebrated for getting it right. My kids are about to embark on their college careers, and so went through this whole last year of applying to colleges, and getting the highest scores on tests is all about getting it right. There wasn't there could be different answers to these gazillion questions. It was like, you got to get it right. And that's then becomes a notion of, I prove my worth by getting it right. And what are we all want to do? We all want to be seen and feel worthy. And so these leaders who really push this really sort of drive from a place of, I am worthy in this meeting if I can show that I am right. And then it leads to all types of not so pleasant behaviors to work with those people.
Well, there's a bit of proving, I'm going to show you, but there's also a bit of, I know I'm right. What's wrong with you that you can't just listen to me and get on with doing it? But people come with such different perspectives and experiences. It's a journey for them too. And what that I know I'm right does, it cuts off people's ability to do the journey.
Yeah. And I think also what happens is, Wanda, is that, again, as an individual contributor where you are being trained to be an expert in something and very specialized in a particular area, yeah, you do need to know you're right? You need to be right. My boss didn't want me to be wrong. But as we grow into leadership and we are trying to grow capacity of a team, or we are trying to get buy-in from others who we do not have authority over. This is the whole influencing without authority that people always ask about. Well, you cannot influence by shoving it down people's throats. And so if you're leading with, I know from my side of the table that I'm right and you need to come to my side, that is not influencing. Influencing is meeting them on their side of the table and walking with them to help them formulate their answer, which you then hope is the same answer that you have. So if you lead from the I know I'm right, rather than, again, the shifting to, how can I guide others to an answer that is suitable for this situation? Or I am a guide for others. I can facilitate getting to an answer. It then lends to a very different tone in how you interact and influence throughout an organization. So not only does this impact the team below you, which, by the way, the leaders who have the I know I'm right belief, what I see happen with their teams is there's this learned helplessness that happens. The team then refuses to come up with answers because they're like, well, I know he's going to have the answer or she's going to have the answer, so why should I bother, right? But there's also huge impact that happens horizontally with peers where they need to have buy-in to certain things. But the way that this leader is actualizing that belief of I know I'm right is alienating those peers rather than, again, cultivating alignment.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm clicking through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 current coaching clients, names to be left out. But yeah, and the crazy thing is they probably are more right than not. I mean, right is never a single path any rate, but they probably have a big grain of truth in what they're seeing and what they think needs to be done. Okay. Can't do it alone though, is the problem.
Nope, absolutely.
All right. Do you have a favorite in this list of 7?
Oh my gosh. I mean, they're all my babies now. And as I said, I've lived through all of them. I think the one that I think I mentioned before that surprised me the most, and I had to sort of really sit with it. It was probably one of the hardest ones that I had to write about, is the if I can do it, so can you, right? And the reason why is because that's often so used as like an inspirational message. And so why is that belief an issue, or can be an issue? Because again, clearly it can have very positive impact. It can motivate others. It can inspire others, but it can also have a very negative impact because what it does behind that is assume that the same blueprint that works for you is the blueprint that's going to work for somebody else. And in effect, what you're also assuming is that everything that has happened up to this point for you is what's happened with this other person. And therefore, they should have the same results as you. Well, what does that lead to? I mean, at a very concrete level, it leads to, frustration because you assign somebody a certain deliverable and then they come back and you're like, oh my God, like why I could do this in 5 seconds. Why can't you do this in 5 seconds? It creates unrealistic expectations. And when I say unrealistic, they are expectations that are grounded in your experience rather than the other's experience. So this is where we start when we see organizations that say, oh, I want my managers to be better coaches. Well, if they carry this belief, they're not going to be able to coach and mentor and develop in the way that you would like them to as an organization. And we send them to these, coaching, training, managers, coach training, but never scratch the surface to say, but wait a minute, there's a belief that's actually getting in the way of you being able to now be able to have these conversations with your team, being able to. So that one was really surprising to me because it is a belief that also has a very positive impact in terms of inspiration, but it can also be very demotivating in terms of particularly how you develop others.
Yeah, I see it in many different ways, but one of the ones that I see is the belief that what motivates me is what's going to motivate you.
That's right.
And I see this often as I get motivated by competition or a little bit of increased pressure or a push or kind of a little more aggressive kind of nudge out there. Come on, you're better than this kind of thing. And if that's what motivates me, then great. But if it's not what motivates you, it's going to undermine performance. And I watch leaders struggle with that, understanding the difference between those two.
Yeah. I mean, Wanda, I think where we're seeing this a lot, quite frankly, is in managing in an intergenerational organization, right? To me, whenever, whether it's a client or quite frankly, a lot of my friends, in my peer age group who are like, oh, these young people, like they don't want to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, underlying that is an expectation that they should operate exactly how we operated. Listen, we grew up in I grew up in an era where, if my boss said jump, it was like, how high? Why? Because I also was brought up in an era where I wasn't raised with having any agency, right? My parents were like, agency, what? There is no agency. You just do what you're told. I look at my kids, who are 18, their whole upbringing was about learning to have agency and choice and speaking up for yourself and defining what you want for your life. Well, I mean, do you really think that you can manage them in the same way that we were managed? No. But if you see that your responsibility as a leader is not to get these folks to do exactly what you did, but rather to build capacity in your organization and build the next generation of leaders so that when you're gone, they can actually lead this organization, you've got to meet them where they are. You've got to figure out, as you just said, what motivates them, what inspires them, how do their skills get developed, what skills do they actually need to be able to lead this organization in the future, rather than look at what you just did.
Right. So you write this as, if I can do it, so can you. But we could also say that a variation on this theme is, if this worked for me, it'll work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I did it this way, then you can do it that way. It's that same model right after me. Okay, I want to talk about an unusual one here. I don't belong here. Because, the general sense around I don't belong here is, well, okay, then just leave. So walk us through the I don't belong here.
Yeah. The I don't belong here is also often talked a lot about, that it only is for individuals who may not be in the dominant group, right? A lot of times it's applied to minorities or, gendered groups, others, if you will. And quite frankly, I have seen this certainly it applies to those audiences. Personally, as a Black woman, I have certainly felt it. But it also applies universally, right? Why? Because when you think about one of the primary human needs, right? You go back to Maslow's hierarchy. Once you get past that basic level of, basic security and shelter, et cetera, one of the next levels is this need of connection. Okay. So when we talk about belonging, what we're really talking about is connection. So whenever we are in any place where we feel like we are not connecting, it starts triggering this very human need of belonging. And there's this voice, unconscious a lot of times, that's like, I don't belong here. Now, that might be big at an organizational level. It might be micro in a meeting, in a room, in a presentation. It doesn't matter. It still serves the same purpose, this feeling of like, I am not feeling connected. So what's interesting to me is that as I dug into this belief, the reframing, quite frankly, is around understanding that if you feel connected to yourself, you belong anywhere, right? This is one that probably gets a lot deeper than the others, because what I find is that a lot of the leaders who I work with who do have this sense of not feeling connected to others is they are trying to kind of outsource this feeling of belonging rather than starting with themselves, which is, I belong to me. In psychological terms, that's often called around not abandoning yourself. And as long as I belong to me, I can really walk into any room and not feel like I don't belong because I'm here. Now, there is a difference between belonging and being accepted. And that is something that I nuance with my clients a lot. If you're in the room, you belong. Like, where else are you? You're not, we're not time traveling here, so you're here. And I think the work here is really in establishing the confidence that wherever you are, if you're in the job, if you're at the table, if you're in the room, there is nothing else that needs to happen for you to belong. You're already there. So now what? If you operate from that place, now what? What do you do?
I see this, and I agree with you. Yes, there are plenty of people who feel othered and huge empathy for that sense of othering, and it isn't always the obvious candidates that feel othered. So I'll just leave that one for the moment. But I see this, I don't belong here, showing up when people get a big promotion and they feel like in some ways I don't deserve. I have to prove I'm not good enough to be at this level. And that sense of I don't belong at this level really drives behaviors that undermine their effectiveness at that level. As opposed to say, I'm at this level, I have things to learn, I'm at the beginning stages, okay, good, but I belong here. This is the right place for me.
That's right. And that becomes more and more critical the more senior you become, or as I say, the more you adult, right? Something that And by the way, Wanda, like a lot of what we're talking about, it mirrors human adult development, right? So one of the things and this is why I bring up my kids a lot. One of the things that, my kids really did not like that we did growing up with them is whenever they'd come home with their report card, we wouldn't look at it. We wouldn't look at it. And we would just ask them, well, how do you think you did? How do you think you did? Because what we wanted to cultivate is, as long as you connect with your own validation, yes, validation from others is important, but it's not necessary for you to be grounded in where you are. And it's not to say you always have to cheer yourself. They're like, oh, I did great. No, we wanted them to also be able to say, yeah, like I didn't do as great as I thought I should have, right? And so how does that translate into adulthood, right? Into leadership? As you just said, you step into that new role. What I often see happens is, in fact, I'm working with somebody right now, big role. And he's feeling, it's not visibly showing, but he's sharing with me, he's feeling a little stressed out. I'm like, well, what's the stress? He's like, I'm not getting any signals around whether I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, whether did they make the right choice? And I'm like, well, what do you think? Right? Like, this is where the adulting happens in leadership. You've got to anchor yourself. And so when I talk about connecting to yourself, it's having your own anchor, your own measures, your own validation, rather than solely outsourcing it to others. Now, should you get input from others? Absolutely. But it can't be the only thing. So this feeling of belonging is not only about connecting to others, it is also about connecting to the situation. And the connection in the example you gave is, I am in this role. I am in this role. I'm accepting I'm in the role, versus, well, I don't know, like maybe I'm here, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not even going to think about it. It's too scary. Oh my God. Like I'm just going to do. No, I'm in the role. What's my plan? What am I thinking about? How am I going to actualize the next 90 days? I am in it and I'm working it, and it has to start there.
I think particularly in the, upper half of your career, when you get that promotion, that you have to sit and say, what do I believe is important? What do I believe needs to be done? What do I think my priorities are? It's a very much grounded in yourself of what you think and then with input from others. I mean, you just don't form that opinion blindly, and validate. Once you've articulated that, yes, I think it's good to validate that seems right to your managers or your stakeholders, so that you're on the same page. It's not just you. But it starts with you. It starts with you recognizing your connection to yourself, to your own experience. That's what got you here.
That's right. And I mean, Wanda, you just hit the nail on the head. Like, if there's one theme I would want folks to take away from our conversation and from all that we've been talking about, is it starts with you, right? And this is not to absolve, particularly for this one, this is not to absolve an organization or a culture that may isolate people, make people feel, othered, as we talked about, or a toxic, there's situations you might not be getting invited to the meeting. But just because you didn't get invited to the meeting doesn't mean you don't belong in the meeting. So the question becomes, so you have to start with I do belong in that meeting. Okay, so then what? How do you actualize that? And one of the things, beyond knowing what's important to you, that I think leaders sometimes have to grow into the ability to do when they really hone in I do belong here, is, okay, if I belong here, then what do I need? What do I need to be successful here? Right? And then, because again, many people talk about I need to be set up for success. Okay, well, but if you don't feel like you belong here, how can you even talk about how to be successful here? Right? And so being able to articulate those needs has to start first from a place of yep, I'm here, I'm doing this. Now what?
Right. All right, Muriel, we could talk for forever, no doubt. I just want to hit the 7. I'm going to get them in a different order than in the book, but I need to be involved. I know I'm right. I can't say no. I need it now. We haven't talked about that one. I can't make a mistake. If I can do it, so can you, and I don't belong here. Powerful beliefs that I see in my coaching practice and my training practice every week without fail. I see those, maybe some others, but those are the big ones, as you say. And the whole point that you're getting at, and that we've spent time on, is focusing on what is the belief, Like, listen, when you get that 360 report and you don't like the results, bet you that one of these beliefs is what's driving you, and you're saying, well, they just don't understand. So I'd encourage you to pause. What are the beliefs? What's that really about? Where did it come from? Kind of do a little deeper analysis on the belief itself. Then I want to reframe the belief to something that's more constructive. Like, I do belong here, so now what? Or here, I need to be involved in these things, but in not everything. So reframe. And then from the reframing, the action plan actually becomes fairly straightforward.
That's right. That's right. And that's where, again, the action plan can look different from people to person to person. It's interesting to me. One of the big learnings for me in work, going through this work, when you asked at the beginning of the conversation, why did you write this? It's like I realized you cannot just cut and paste the same action plan from one person to the other because the belief might be different, right? But when you are able to look at the beliefs, you realize, wow, there's a whole menu of actions I can take now versus the same one that I used to.
I love it. All right. My guest today, Muriel Wilkins. Boy, I can't even speak. Leadership Unblocked. Break through the beliefs that limit your potential. Muriel, if people want to find you, where should they go?
Absolutely. So I'm always available on my website, murielwilkins.com. That's where you will find everything about me. I'm on LinkedIn at Muriel Wilkins and on Instagram at Coach Muriel Wilkins.
Perfect. What a great conversation. Love the book. Highly recommend it. So thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much, Wanda. This was a pleasure.
Thank you. And join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone. And please do check out our new website, outofthecomfortzone.com, and our new YouTube channel at Out of the Comfort Pod. There's also a brand new Instagram channel dedicated to the podcast at Out of the Comfort Pod as well. And we'll see you next week.